When Joker was released in 2019, it stood apart largely because of its distinct tone and aesthetic. Inspired heavily by films like Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, Todd Phillips drew upon the gritty, disillusioned cinema of the 70s to craft Arthur Fleck's world, a world filled with dirt, grime, and desperation. The movie felt like a time capsule of the 70s, capturing Gotham in a way that evoked the urban decay of New York City from that era. It gave viewers a setting that was harsh and uninviting, which perfectly mirrored Arthur's mental unravelling. The brilliance of Joker was in its commitment to being raw and unapologetic. The film was unflinching in showing the descent of a man who was abandoned by society, and the viewer felt every ounce of that isolation. Joaquin Phoenix's performance as Arthur Fleck was visceral. Every moment, every awkward laugh, every smile that failed to reach his eyes, it made the audience feel Arthur's pain and his spiral into the darkness of becoming the Joker. The tone was bleak but focused, and that's what made the movie feel so cohesive and compelling. The tension built scene by scene, maintaining an unbroken atmosphere of foreboding, where every action seemed to have weight and consequence. The film's visual style, harsh lighting, muted colours, interspersed with moments of vivid imagery, contributed to a sense of realism, a city on the brink of chaos. There was a deliberate slowness, a careful build-up that ensured the climax was cathartic. You could feel influences from Scorsese's filmography throughout it, the focus on an unreliable, isolated protagonist, the critique of social neglect, and the gradual, inevitable slip into violence. This was not a superhero film, nor a traditional villain origin story that you'd normally get in comic books. It was a tragic character study, really set in a bleak, almost hyper-real universe, and it worked because it stayed true to that vision throughout. With that foundation, Joker Part 2 faced the challenge of following an act that was perfectly contained, a one-man descent into chaos. When the news broke about a sequel, there was an understandable curiosity mixed with skepticism. Where could Arthur's story go from here? And more importantly, how could the team maintain the integrity of the original? The rumours of the sequel being a musical were disconcerting to say the least. How would a genre shift fit within the gritty, psychologically driven narrative we were given? It seemed like a massive departure from what audiences connected with in the first film. Nevertheless, I was willing to see if Todd Phillips and his team could somehow bring this ambitious idea to life in a way that made sense, even if my instincts told me otherwise. Sadly, my concerns were realised as soon as the film began. One of the biggest issues with Joker Part 2 was that it seemed unsure of what kind of movie it wanted to be. The first Joker was tonally consistent, dark, somber, a journey without any illusion-breaking moments. In contrast, the sequel appeared to subvert everything the first film achieved by awkwardly jumping between genres. It felt like it was trying to be dark and gritty, just like the original, but there were moments constantly interrupted by the sudden eruption of musical numbers. The musical sequences were the most glaring misstep. There was an attempt to use these musical numbers to give insight into Arthur's mental state, similar to the first film where you didn't really see if it was reality or something that was going on in his psyche, but the execution was flawed. They weren't just sudden, they were abrupt and poorly integrated and lacked the natural flow necessary to make them feel immersive. Instead of feeling like an organic expression of Arthur's psyche, the songs felt bolted on, almost as if someone took two different films and spliced them together. And as a result, they snapped the audience out of the experience each time one began. The audience reaction was telling as well. As soon as a musical number started, you could feel the collective disconnect. People shifted in their seats, whispers began, and it was clear that the film was losing its grip on the viewers. The tension, whenever it began to build, was immediately deflated, and just as we were getting back into the dark, immersive world, another song would burst forth like a balloon being abruptly popped. And this constant shift in tone stuttered the film's tempo, preventing any real build-up of emotional weight or narrative momentum. Now, the courtroom scenes were another point of frustration. These moments, intended to be pivotal, ended up feeling really hollow. The dialogue was uninspired, it lacked the heft needed to make those scenes impactful. While Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga both delivered strong performances, they felt really constrained by a script that didn't give them enough to work with. Phoenix brought the same intensity that made Arthur such a compelling figure in the first film, and Gaga had glimpses of brilliance, but the writing just didn't support them. The talents were effectively wasted on lines that didn't really resonate and on scenes that felt really drawn out. Moreover, the pacing was probably the biggest problem here. At over 2 hours 20, the film felt bloated and stretched beyond what the story could really sustain. There were long, meandering sequences that felt aimless, contributing little to character development or the overarching story, and the film's length seemed less a result of careful storytelling and more of an inability to decide what should be left on the cutting room floor. and the end result was a movie that felt like it was dragging and every minute of its 2 hours 20 runtime. The audience reaction said it all. Several people walked out of my theatre, something I hadn't seen happen for a very long time. There was a collective sense of disinterest as the film moved past the halfway point. People just weren't engaged. They were restless, disconnected, and visibly unimpressed. And when a film causes multiple roads to leave, it's a sign that it's failed at the most basic level, which is essentially just to hold your attention and provide a worthwhile experience. Joker Part 2 ultimately ended up being the biggest cinematic disappointment of 2024 so far for me. It tried to do something different, and, I applaud the fact that they took a gamble on something. But in doing so, it lost everything that made the original so compelling. The shift in genre, the musical elements, the weak script, all of it combined to create an experience that was disjointed and unfocused. What we got was not a continuation of Arthur Fleck's journey, but rather a jumbled, confused film that couldn't decide on its own identity. The movie had the potential to build on the powerful foundation of the first film, but instead, it undermined it at every turn. And what's even more baffling is that they had the resources to do it right. It had a staggering $200 million budget. Todd Phillips essentially had a blank check. The success of the first film meant that there was seemingly no limit on what could be done. And sometimes, ironically, this kind of freedom can be its own downfall. The first Joker thrived on its constraints. It was small, intimate, and every dollar had to be spent carefully to deliver that raw, authentic experience. And here, the budget bloated everything, stripping the story of the intimacy that made it resonate. It's a film that overreaches. It sacrifices substance for the sake of trying something different without understanding why the hell the original works so well. And for that reason, I can't recommend it. It misses the mark on almost every level, failing to honour the emotional weight and the vision that made the first film so unforgettable. And sometimes trying to push boundaries can lead to brilliance, but sometimes it can lead to a loss of what made something special in the first place. And here, sadly, it's the latter. Well, thank you for watching. If you agree or disagree, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Joker Part 2, Folie à Deux, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more reviews. Until next time, take care.